Right, thanks for the introduction. How many are there from Finland here? A few? And the rest are local? How many international? Are you all from Estonia? Very good, yeah. It's an international university. So I'm going to be talking about growing an open city. That's the topic of the day. Because it's kind of a long slot which has been reserved for me, I have a few breaks there in which I do hope that you are not a Finnish audience, but more like Estonian talkative debating audience. So let's start with that. And yes, we are in the context of Finest Twins project in which we should build this twin city functioning, first of its kind, two-city center of excellence for smart solutions. That's the point. And it's really quite a unique project, so I think it's good to keep that in mind, that we don't have such a place anywhere yet. But first, let's think about how cities develop. Did you know that Los Angeles had the biggest amount of trams anywhere still in the 50s? The best functioning public transport system probably in the world at that time. And what happened was that the one-sided lobbying from General Motors and the others led to that. Those are the LA trams. They were all torn down. And the challenge with making big systemic changes in cities is that if you fail, it's very expensive to bring them back. So they're now trying to reintroduce functioning public transport in LA, and they don't have rails anymore. And that becomes challenging when we deal with the speed of technology, which is expanding. Cities are slow to change, but technology moves fast. And the way we design cities and the way we design regulation has a tough time keeping up. That drone is the very drone which fell on the courtyard of the White House in February this year. The guy was flying around the White House taking pictures and bumped into a tree, and the drone fell down, and he got scared and escaped. Of course, there were means to find the guy, so FBI was at his door in an hour's time with a few big black cars and even more big men, and he wasn't charged for anything because there were no laws saying that you can't fly a drone around the White House. Because when security laws were drafted, nobody thought that there might be an opportunity to, for example, put a bomb in such a thing and then fly it in the courtyard of the White House. So how do we keep up with the speed of digitalization in our cities? What routes should we take? A few key points maybe which form a sort of a philosophy to this talk is that I used to be an architect, but I don't believe that city consists of buildings or transport or any such things. It consists of people. So everything else in the city is there to support the community. We are the city. Without the people, there is no city. The problem with people is that we tend to mess up things. So cities are at a constant attempt to go into the state of chaos. Cities are not machines, except maybe for Dubai. That's the closest to a machine I've ever seen. But normal cities are organisms which grow with us, which have failures, which have faults, which are incomplete, and which constantly change. And it's tough to design a unified system for that. So I don't believe in smart city dashboards or smart city full systems or smart city complete integration. The city is not a company which can be, you can put an ERP on and then everything works like a clockwork. Cities are utterly more complex than that, and if you try to solve a city, normally we get to very trivial questions. Those are solvable, but that city as a complete whole can't be solved. But we can solve parts and bits and pieces and try to make them harmonized with each other. Solving a city is the same question as solving a society. It's a wicked problem. There's not a perfect solution for that. And that has been one of the problems of the smart city thinking this far. I mean, we are in the sort of a second wave of smart cities. And the second wave is more holistic. This is a Boyd Cohen 6-tier attempt to describe a smart city. When the first smart city projects were more linked to just environment or energy and traffic, this brings on board also citizens, smart governance and economy. And the first wave cities like Songdo in Korea or Masdar in Abu Dhabi have already shown that that way to do smart cities is not scalable and it's not actually flexible enough to keep up with the times. Songdo is already old. It actually doesn't support, for example, app economy very well because it was designed during the time, well, we all didn't have a million apps in our phones which we want to use in a city. So it doesn't provide open interfaces to Songdo systems. And also the first wave smart cities were big investments and they don't seem to be sellable. So people don't really want to, cities don't buy these dashboards and multi-million euro projects from IBM and the rest. And there are different reasons for that. First of all, cities are very aware nowadays of technology lock-ins. They don't want to do that. Second, they tend to be one-sided and not covering the city as a whole. And third, it's pretty rare that you have such a city. You take a big plot of empty land and you start from the scratch. Most cities we have already. I mean, you can't tear down Tallinn and rebuild it as a smart city. Hopefully, at least. So we need to retrofit our cities to become smart. And that's a very different process from redesigning the city, like was done in Masdar. You rethink everything. And of course, if you rethink everything, those solutions don't necessarily fit very well for retrofitting, in which you would need to introduce them to an already existing cityscape and already existing systems and mechanisms which we have. So, and these are the Q marks. Any disagreements? Ideas? Thoughts at this point?
How do you disagree with Guru?
Sorry?
How do you disagree with Guru?
I'm not the Guru. Don't use that word.
People are afraid of failing. So.
I'm as far from a Guru as possible. Ask my staff. Right. So, and I have 4 things I want to share with you now about how we could approach this communities as partners, then the open approach, then sort of labs as a tool for development, and lastly city networks. So I try to cover all these in the coming couple of tens of minutes. And the first is the communities as partners. So as I said, city consists of people. So that's what city is. And the fact is that now when we all carry user interfaces to a city in our pocket. And they are exceedingly present in urban space. So we have screens, we have billboards, we have smart tools. And it's very improbable that city as an organization could provide us with all the possible services we want to use in a city. That must be the urban community which does that. So the combination of companies which are there, us as users, and the city as an organization. And because user interfaces are everywhere, that brings with them service platforms with which we use different services. And these we are now seeing popping up to different areas of urban innovations. The biggest urban innovations in recent years are not from the urban design sector at all. They are these service platforms. Uber is a massive urban innovation, which came as a total surprise for cities, messing up the taxi systems. And they are coming to surprising areas like well-being. Patients like me is a community of sick people. You can find your peers there. You can have a very, very rare disease. And you can find there people who live in other countries, speak other language, but you share something which is very critical for you. And you get the support. And it's been used, for example, quite serious medical testing, finding side effects of treatments, etc. at a far more reasonable price than traditional face testing of medical industry, because people do it voluntarily on the platform. And then we have services which didn't exist a few years back and now are almost monopolies, like Airbnb, which is the biggest accommodation chain in the world, and they have 0 flats. They may have a few, of course. It could be that the owners own a few flats. But their capital are your apartments. And that's of course, that's the whole trick of service platforms. Very often it's a horizontal distributed model, integration model, in which what you distribute, you don't own, which of course from business perspective is really, really efficient. You don't have to invest in 1 million hotels. You invest only in the platform. And they grow fast because you don't have to invest in the hotels, so you can grow fast. 34,000 cities, 192 countries. And that's what all the platforms are searching for. Critical mass and critical speed. As big as possible, as soon as possible. Never mind the profits at that stage. Stockman has been, the CEO of Stockman has been giving interviews about why should they go to online shopping when nobody makes money there. Which is a complete false perspective to the topic. I mean, as long as online shopping grows, what Amazon does is put each and every dollar it makes into growing faster than the market in general, to get the critical mass, to beat the others. And of course, for us, the challenge in Europe is that these tend to come not from Europe, but from the US, exceeding from Asia. And our key challenge there is that we don't have a proper market in Europe. We have an Estonian-sized market and a Finnish-sized market and a France-sized market, but it's not unified. It doesn't work as one market. For various reasons, regulation isn't the smallest one, which is actually one thing we should be working on in Finest Twins. How do we build a smart city market? The interface creates new forms of urbanism. When you come to a new city nowadays, you start to search things immediately. You didn't do that before the smartphones. You came to a new city, to the railroad station, and you started to walk to some direction. Maybe you had a guide or something. Then everybody walked the same paths. Some people still do it in the old town of Tallinn, but that's a different breed. But what many people do is that we can search for things which are in odd places. We can create flash mobs, gather together using the smart tools. And it creates new forms of urbanism like the restaurant day or the siivouspäivä, cleaning day, which is a Finnish thing, now spreading around the world, in which the city turns into a massive flea market. 3,500 and plus last time it was organized a few weeks back. So everywhere people are selling stuff, and you can Google use the app to find what you want to buy and search exactly that seller from amongst the thousands of sellers. And we can use that also for more, should I say, serious things. Of course, I mean, recycling is a serious thing. But here's another serious thing. That's a pulse point. And that's a crowdsourced app to connect people who get a heart attack, the defibrillators, which are in the US, like in every shop there's a defibrillator, and people who can use them. If you can give first aid with a defibrillator, you put your data there, that I am one who can use this. And then other people have the app in their phones. And what happened when it was launched, and this is the original map of where you can get first aid for heart attacks in California, and this is after the service was launched. You go to a shopping mall, a guy falls down, oh damn, he has a heart attack, I can't do anything, but I have this app, alert, and somebody in the shop gets the alert, okay, well, somebody got an attack, and gets the defibrillator from the closet and helps the person. And think about these opportunities for things like elderly people support, caregiver networks, community childcare, etc. So we as city should be the enablers of these opportunities. And this is from the city of Helsinki ICT strategy, which is, I think, a clever way to think about it. There are some things we just runs and owns and invest in, but then it also monitors what the urban community does and can help to drive things it finds valuable. And maybe stop doing something which the market does well. There are 0 apps for public transport in Helsinki because made by City of Helsinki, because it doesn't make any sense. We open the interfaces and all the apps are done by private developers because they are much better than city designed apps normally. Same is true for the Finnish land registry, which opened 2 years back all the maps of Finland as open data because they found that they are not very good at making, for example, mountain biking applications at the Finnish land registry, but there are people who are good at that, who can use the maps to do a very specialized app for a niche audience. But how to do that when we have the old legacy? You are one of the only countries which doesn't have that situation. That's the average ICT system of a city. It's not even Helsinki because we have 680 something. So that's less. There are less incompatible systems there than Helsinki has. But yet, it's a mess. I mean, most cities have decades of existing systems which are incompatible, proprietary, closed, without any interfaces at all, etc. And it's tough to open it. And that is also something for which we can and should use community help, which is what I'm gonna be talking about next. But at this stage, any questions, ideas, proposals? I do have a Finnish audience here.
I can cheer up people a bit actually. Just the concept you're talking about, I like the idea very much. You know how much people in the urban areas was in 1950? How many million? Okay, the number was 750 million. How much is now? What do you think? 750, 1950? How much people live in urban areas at the moment?
3.5 million.
4.4. So 54% of people in the world live in urban areas.
Yeah.
And they prognose that in 30 years the number will be 6.5 billion. So basically the paradigm what we're fighting is the globalization and urbanization. And as the resources are getting scarcer, then it's not the thing that the smart city is a hype project. It's actually a need to live further.
I don't think, maybe Lou Manovic, yesterday I was speaking at the Tallinn Architecture Biennale, and Lou Manovic proposed to me after the talk that, drop this word smart from the presentation altogether. You are talking about cities per se. And that makes sense because if we use the word smart city, of course we have to use it for policy reasons, etc. But in itself, to be an unsmart city is not an option. It's not an option for a city. All cities are smart cities. It only depends how conscious they are about the use of technology. All cities face the same challenge and need to work with it. And maybe the smartest cities are the ones who understand that they have to work with it. All right. Civic hackers and openness. There are a special group of people, the lead users of the city, who can do more with your data than you ever can. So no matter how clever people City of Tallinn has working for them or government of Estonia, if we drop the City of Tallinn from this, Most clever people in Tallinn don't work for the city. It's just a mathematical fact. Yeah, the biggest amount of clever people don't work for the city unless you have hired the whole population. But and it doesn't make any sense not to work with them, because now with digital time we do have the opportunity to work with that group. There are different reasons you don't design a city without architects, but yet we tend to sometimes design ICT without coders, and that leads to situations where, for example, we don't understand that we step into monopoly. One of the problems of digitalization is that it creates monopolies faster than anything ever before. As I said, Airbnb is close to a monopoly, and it's only 6-7 years old company. Google obviously is one, and probably would have been sued in the older times, and I think they are in the process now. So the European Commission is doing at least something to not let them index the whole world. And I don't think cities can stop the development. I mean, it's all about critical mass, as I said, but we should be aware of that, and we should be careful not to, for example, let our data and our processes to be hijacked by a private company, but to understand that it's still our data, and how can we get it out. How can we change systems? How can we build modular structures which don't get a stranglehold of us? Which is, again, something which Estonia has as one of the only nations, maybe the only nation, solved in quite a clever way with the X-Road system. But it's only one area of services. And then other thing is, of course, that when things are digital, they are hackable. Do you know that case that's a few months old? That's a sniper rifle. It's a horrible thing. You can kill a person from 2 kilometers away with that. It's a digitally controlled sniper rifle which hits the smallest of targets with the fiercest of power. And it was hacked by these guys with a laptop and Wi-Fi. It had one fixed password, and they just found it pretty easily, and then they hacked it to fail, miss the target, or even worse, to hit the target when that wasn't the idea. So I managed to change the settings from the laptop without any special technology, which basically shows how clueless companies can be when they embed ICT in their systems. Think about that in the context of energy systems or self-driving cars. And to avoid these situations, we do need the nerds. So Helsinki, for example, has the Helsinki Loves Developers program, which is hosted by us, which connects city citizens and civic hackers. Hacker is a positive word, remember that. Cracker is the negative, but hackers are good. So we have a constant process to work between the developers and the city. There are code fellow programs which I wholeheartedly recommend, which basically means embedding nerds in the system, in the public sector for a limited period of time, so that they also form a network. Code for America was the first, and there's Code for EU and the Code Fellows program. We have done that with success in Helsinki, in the Finnish Helsinki Transportation Authority, and several other bodies. And there are great outcomes of that. Like, for example, when a company who's hosting a system said that, we can't do that. Guy goes and says, yes, you can, you only do this and this and this. Okay. Or that will cost you 100,000 euros. No, it won't, because it only takes 5 hours to do it, and I did it already. We've seen all these cases. I mean, they decipher the methodology in the systems and make it understandable. They can be awarded. Apps for Europe and App Circus are international concepts, and we have the Open Finland Challenge, in which we create challenge competitions for best solutions using open data, open interfaces. And that's now already 8 years old competition. We got about 100 applicants every year, so it's very, very, very popular. And very importantly, we have to find the change makers from within the system. The person there in the middle is Asta Manninen. She's a radical lady. She's the director of Urban Facts department, and she's the advocate of open data in Helsinki. And without her, it would have never happened, because if we don't have the change makers within the system doesn't change. And they are not necessarily directors or leaders. They can be at any levels of the organization, and normally they all feel alone. So if they get peer support and if they are connected with each other, they become stronger, and they can create internal change maker networks within the system. So until this point, during the last 10 years, Forum Virium has failed each and every time. We haven't had such a person in the sort of a customer side. And then we failed sometimes when we have had such a person, but mostly, at least, we have had a chance to succeed if we have the change maker. And of course, nerds need food and nerds eat data, and data must be open by default. Free to use, free to reuse, and free to distribute. So no charging for data. And why? Because public sector is really, really bad at making business with data. So let's just let the companies do it. I mean, in Finland, the public sector sells data with about 60 million euros a year. It's not a big money, but it's even more funny is that 50 million of that 60 million comes from other sources in the public sector. It's like Donald Duck money, which comes from one pocket and goes to the other. Benefits nobody. And municipalities buy from the government, and government buys from the statistical center. It's like mock economy. Whereas if we compare, for example, the United States scene, where geographical data and weather data have been open for decades, the business in the US, which is about the same size of market as Europe, is about 4 times bigger in both of these areas, geographical services. There's $1 billion business in weather services. In EU, it's about 200 million euro. Considerably smaller, because we don't have it open Europe-wide. So, and how to open, it must be a structured process. That's the Helsinki Region InfoShare process, which was started in 2010 and now runs as a permanent operation. And the trick is that you have to actually be very disciplined. You find the data. You help to clear the data, to harmonize the data, which is for most departments, it's not their usual business to work with data, so they need help. You make it available, and you make sure that people can find it. Then you help the developers with their ideas, you get feedback, you open the data which is requested for, you give tools to work with the data and to harmonize to make it better. And then you get the users. Conscious process, disciplined process, task force which goes through the government and does that work. And exceedingly, we are moving from just data to real-time interfaces, real-time APIs. So that's the, which is, of course, they are really valuable. That's the example from the United States. It's actually a company called O-Power, which sells a product which is an easy-to-use interface for energy company customers. So it's an end-user product from customer's point of view. If you move from one region to the other, you select a company which can provide you with a nice interface to your energy usage. And that's the O-Power interface. How they do it is that they harmonize the back end to match that of each and every energy company, which is a cumbersome task, but seems to be paying off a few billion kilowatt hours of saved energy as the outcome. And we get innovations with open data. That's Blind Square. I've used that umpteen times. Sorry for the ones who see me speak before. It's a Finnish app, which is the audio interface for the blind people. So it uses open data from several sources and turns it into a hearing guide, which is co-designed with the blind people. It's open source, available now in, I don't know, 18 languages or so. So it's been translated by the user community to different languages. And now they are working with indoor navigation, adding beacons to that you can also use that in shopping malls, etc. And they are also working with the idea to turn that into an audio guide for travelers, because think of it, if you, for example, come from China, it's a pretty odd landscape where you land when you come here to Europe, And you travel a short while and everything is different. Language, science, the whole infrastructure. And of course, open data gives efficiency and transparency for the government. That's Open Ahjo. It's the decision-making data of Helsinki was opened about 2 years back. Last year we opened all the spending, each and every receipt. If I use the City of Helsinki credit card today, tomorrow it can be checked from the website that guy used. Credit card. Then that was launched. The Helsingin Sanomat ran a series of news stories about horrible public spending and blaming individual civil servants. And then they interviewed the mayor, like, okay, now do you regret for doing that? And I think the answer was pretty good, because mayor said, if the civil servants spend public funding on average 2% more responsibly, because they know that it can be scrutinized, that means 60 million euros a year. So, I mean, the plus sides outweigh the downsides of it. Transparency increases responsibility. And one thing which I think we should take into account when we work with finest twins, because we should be looking in the future, is that how does all that link to individual people? So I think we should have the my data aspect as part of our project. We should rethink how we approach privacy in the realm of open data. Currently, privacy is considered as a public matter, as something which can be regulated and ruled as a confidentiality laws, etc. But the fact is that the realm in which our data is, from well-being to shopping systems to banks to insurance companies to government, is too complex to be managed by a law. How it should be managed is that we can manage our own data. If I want to be completely transparent and publish my X-rays online, I should be able to do it. And if I want to opt out and leave no trace, I should be able to do it. But I can't if I don't have access and visibility to a management dashboard for my data. And the question is, how should we build that? What is the system? We do know that there are different trends now which work towards that. And the biggest one is that the big platform operators want to be your data managers. They want to provide you with that service. The challenge with that is twofold. First of all, competing platforms don't exchange data then. And second, it's all run by companies which are not from here at all. And third, it's not really transparent. They show you what they want to show you. And this is a big question, and I think this is something, if we solve this in Europe, we can bring something completely new to the discussion of digital services and safety in the future. And I think this is something we should work with in the finest project. Should we have a public data integrator, which is cross-border, cross-national, non-profit actor, or what is the system? I don't have an answer for that yet. All right, a few more things to go. Any questions at this stage? Does my data make you worry or happy? No questions? Yeah.
Isn't this my data also the main problem that those old systems, or also the existing governmental systems, like you showed in city aspect, is also a big burden there, or what's the main difficulty?
The main difficulty with my data now, the main difficulty probably is that there is not, actually there is no way to get it. It's opaque at the moment. If I ask for my data from operator, for example, they will send me a bunch of paper about my phone calls. I don't get access as data anywhere, so there's no interface to it. Second is, of course, that it tends to be locked behind different systems, and for example, the Finnish healthcare system thinks that the data is theirs, not mine, even though they are mine, my X-rays.
Similar in Estonia.
Yeah. Yes?
You talked about monopolies in the beginning, and
Yeah.
somehow you indicated that the monopoly is not a good thing. But cities are by nature monopolies. So it's just one city, the city government which runs the city.
Yeah.
So I think when we talk about the smart city, having a homogeneous way of doing things is good, isn't it? Of what technologies are applied, how they interoperate and so on. Because otherwise, if there's no interoperability, then you end up with silos or
yes,
and you don't get the actual smart city benefits.
I'll address that later. I think, yes, I partly agree. However, I think there are different, more shades in interoperability than black and white. There are different ways to build loose coupling between systems, which actually don't mean that all stuff is within the same system. But when it comes to monopolies, I do agree. Actually, that's a monopoly which should remain, I think. There's one body in most societies which have a monopoly for violence, and that's the government. And that's something we shouldn't outsource to companies. I mean, we have decided that government can have a right to use violence against us, and exceedingly our data is part of ourselves. And you can also be violent against our data and violent towards us using our data. And that's also something we shouldn't allow. That is the governmental regulation which dictates what you can do to a person's data, and not private sector uses terms of usage.
So there should be regulation for that.
There should be definitely a regulation for that. The problem is, how do you build agile regulation? That's also probably something we can discuss and should discuss in Finance Twins. How do you build agile regulation? Because technology moves so fast that the law-making process is horribly slow for that. How do you build regulation which reacts fast enough to different situations? Okay, towards doing things in the city, urban labs. So labs are popping up everywhere. It's a trend word, if you haven't noticed. So Barcelona is a lab, and there's a Gov lab in New York, and Living Labs in Helsinki. And there's a reason for that, and that's because they seem to work. And the reason in digital realm, it doesn't make sense to assume anything. Because you can test stuff. You can easily set up a prototype, the minimum viable product, and kick it off and see how it works, instead of thinking about how it might work. And that's something which the companies do all the time. If you use Google or Facebook, you are being tested. Each and every time you use it, you are subject of several A/B tests, in which different users get different versions of the interface, and then the algorithm checks which one works better, and that route is taken when the service is redesigned. Google drives about 2,000 A/B tests all the time, every day. They keep on fine-tuning their systems very aggressively, which is something the public sector never does. What we do is that for 2 years we define how the service should be, and then we open a procurement process, and then 5 years after we have opened the procurement process, we get the product, which is already outdated. It's a stupid way to do things. It's not of this world anymore. So how can we use agile methods? And labs are one way to do it. You have very concrete urban labs. That's an urban lab from Times Square 2009. They had talked about blocking off parts of Times Square from traffic, and all the taxi driver associations were furious about it, said that it will be absolutely intolerable, it will totally kill the traffic of Manhattan. And then they tested. So they bought 300 chairs and put them on the street to check if anyone sits in them and if the traffic goes in a chaos. And people did sit in them, and traffic found new routes. Traffic is like water, it always finds new routes. You can't stop it.
New York traffic is anyway chaos.
Yeah, it's a different. Actually, it would be interesting if you had to organize New York transport now, would the system be, let's buy 450,000 cabs and put them on the street? Is that the best solution? So that's an urban lab. There is a challenge with the labs, however, which is with digitalization, there's a challenge of horizontal leadership in cities. Cities tend to work in silos. You work less so in Estonia than Helsinki, for example, works. Helsinki is horribly siloed. It's easier for the city planning department to work with a private developer than the city construction department. And there are several layers of problems of readiness, and I have loaned these slides from my good friend Peter Ballon from iMind, so all the credit to him, because I think he's put them quite well. Smart city readiness problems. Technology readiness, which is the right time to embed a technology in the city. Market readiness, what's the development situation of the markets. And then policy. How are we mentally ready and regulation-wise ready to adapt new solutions. And living labs can be a tool to attack those challenges. How it goes, it can go like this. There's an infrastructure dilemma, how to avoid vendor lock-in. Information dilemma, how to get info out of these silos. Then how to be fast enough in innovation, and how to sync technology, market and policy across all the stakeholders, companies, developers, citizens and the cities. And the idea behind urban living labs is that you have 4 layers of enablers. You have open APIs, technology solutions which can help to solve the infrastructure dilemma. You open the data by default to solve the information dilemma. You work with the local ecosystem, the developer collaboration, and the company partnerships to work to the innovation dilemma. And then the living lab orchestrates those layers, acts as a matchmaker to bring them together. That's something, that's the only thing Forum Virium Helsinki does, is that work. We bring stakeholders together, act as bridge builders. The World Bank sees the same thing as this sort of a smart city roadmap, so it's the same kind of idea to this. You have the academic sector, citizens, private sector, and government, and the traditional way for governments to think that they have all the knowledge and they distribute it there. But instead, we should think of ways to bring them all together to create more holistic idea about how the city works, and co-create then solutions between these stakeholders. And that model is the urban living lab. So the way to bring insights from civil society to the government, to bring academic approach to better understand the insights, and then to turn all that into business opportunities for smart cities or cities. And I think if we solve this in Finance Twins, how do we operate this center of excellence located here in Tallinn but operating in both cities? One of the opportunities we do have is the urbanization trends of the world, because I mean our cities are not growing, but there are dozens and dozens and dozens of other cities which are growing very, very fast. And we can export that knowledge, the model from Tallinn, not actually to Europe, but to South America, Asia, those markets. Examples, I need to speed up a bit. GovLab in New York does exactly that. So it builds prototype solutions, trains people to better understand digitalization, learns itself how to do it better, and connects different stakeholders. That's the 4 things it does. And then we are now kicking off a project called Select for Cities, with new Horizon 2020 funded initiative between Antwerp, Barcelona and Helsinki, which develop cities as Internet of Everything labs. And that's interesting because that's a challenge-based process. So we're actually organizing a competition for companies to come up with new best concept for open Internet of Everything labs for these 3 cities. So different phases through pre-commercial procurement, from concepts to prototypes to larger pilots. Starts next year. Right, and then maybe I have a few more things I need to rush through, and I already used 46 minutes. But questions at this stage?
Is it possible to have a smart city without smart government?
I don't think so. Who are you referring to, or which government? But you can find the change makers within every government.
Just a comment to you. I'm sorry for talking so much, but it's kind of, I feel I need to cheer you up, so don't be so Finnish on the story. I came yesterday from Košice, Slovakia. It's a bit smaller town than Tallinn, 250,000 people. And their problem was actually that they don't have game changers. They want to have a science park, they want to have a smart city, they want to have a startup scene, but exactly the people, they don't have a driver person. They will say that, let's do it. And so there's kind of, how you call it, this kind of going rounds in one place.
If you think of a smart city as think of a smart city sort of a lab, innovation lab as a startup. What do you look at when you check the startup? You look at the team. What kind of a team do they have? Is the team good? Same for if you want to do transformation in the city, you need to have the team with all the stakeholders, and the city change makers are part of those stakeholders. And they can be educated also. If they have to have the will, people are quick learners. I mean, you can also, if the attitude is right, everything else can be fixed. All right, the last point is the smart city networks, and there's an obvious reason why I emphasize that in this context, besides that we have such a project, is that one city is not a market, not in the digital domain. That's a very, very common misunderstanding by the cities, that when I'm New York, I'm like a market. Well, New York might be, but Tallinn isn't, or Helsinki. 600,000 people, 1 million people, 2 million people, that's not a market in digital domain. You can't make a living out of that group of people. Or if you can, you have to make all your money in that particular city, which means that your systems are expensive for the city, because one city pays the bill, instead of building compatible systems in which you have multiple people to do it. And of course, from the user perspective, it should be that we can bring our own service to the city and it works. But when you move from Tampere to Helsinki, you don't have to relearn everything. But I could use the same apps, the same dashboard. And that's again, well, that's something we can learn, rapidly importing in some aspects of our governance system to Helsinki. This is a loose coupling thing, so the trick is that I don't believe in these ERPs for the city, the smart city OS, etc. kind of ideas. I believe in a more internet-like structure in which you integrate systems with an on-need basis. You integrate the data models on an ad hoc way, that when you need to integrate systems of different cities, then you do it. But they are not permanently connected with each other. You have shared data models, shared APIs, compatible open data platforms, and then you tap into those. But it doesn't mean that we would have the same system, or like big, massive control center somewhere below the Baltic Sea for Tallinn and Helsinki. That's not, we don't need that. Examples of how to do it, that's a city SDK project we ran for a few years. 8 European cities harmonized interfaces for mobility, and tourism, and citizen feedback, citizen participation, issue tracking. And what we did was not the apps, but the interface, which made it possible for developers to develop the apps so that the information goes to the city. Very simple idea. And immediately it creates services. And these kind of things are win-win situations, because what the city gets is Metro magazine visibility, which is much better than city website. And what the Metro magazine gets is good service for citizens and their readers. Everybody wins. But it's only one small snippet of data. We are now expanding that in Finland. We are working with the 6 largest cities of Finland in 6-Aika project, 6-pack strategy. Harmonizing participation, open data interfaces, and open innovation platform areas. Very simple principles. Joint projects by 2 or more cities, so you can't do a singular one city project. Cities are in charge, and all cities are in joint spearhead projects, and then we have open course for pilots in 6-Aika. The Danish smart city network is now replicating that in Denmark. So there will be a 5-pack project in Denmark. It's about 100 million euros of regional funds and city funds which are being used for that. Another example in which I think we should join now, we should gather a group of Estonian cities to join the Open and Agile Smart Cities initiative. That's a very, very new network. So we started was launched in January this year. And basically the idea behind Open and Smart Cities, it's an initiative in which the cities devote to shared open data models, opening the data in compatible platforms, and opening the APIs in compatible ways, and doing all that in practice, so piloting culture. We are organized the work in special interest groups around these different topics. And in March, 31 cities joined, and now next 2 weeks from here in Tampere and Mindtrek there will be 61 cities, so the 30 new cities joining the network. So cities are really hungry for these hands-on, pragmatic processes in which they can actually work together to solve these issues. Not do policy about smart cities, but actually work to open certain interfaces between cities, build the enablers. And the key idea behind both of these is to change the operational culture of cities to support openness and participation. Actually, it doesn't matter if some projects will fail. Some projects will fail. The problem with the, especially European project domain, is that we can't say out loud that that was a horrible failure, even though we all know that those happen. But even in the failed projects, what we can get is the networks of change makers between our cities. Of course, we will totally succeed in finest twins, so that's, I'm not saying that. But I do hope that when it kicks off, we take daring risks in the finest twins project portfolio, and we fail miserably in some of the projects. That we lean so much forward that some of them just doesn't fly, because that means that we've done things right. Innovation is all about trying to reach the unreachable, and sometimes missing it. So, there's one last slide, and that's about when I say participation. There's something which I think we should take into account, and probably work with that also as a research topic. And that's the equation from Google's Andrea Watson-Strong, who actually has adapted it from William Riker and Peter Orreshuk. And that's an old equation. Riker and Orreshuk came up with that in 1969. And that's their original equation was what's the probability for a person to vote? And Watson-Strong turned it into what's the probability equation for a person to participate? Because when we talk about participation, we also often throw it out and yes, let's make people participate. What does it mean? From a personal perspective, what does it mean? And what should we do to create maybe better functioning participation than, let's take as an example, maybe the Finnish government Otakanta.fi portal, in which who participates are wannabe politicians and lobbyists. They are the ones who participate there. And the equation goes so that the probability of outcome, P, times personal benefits plus the sense of duty must be bigger than the cost of participation. So in the case of individual person, probability of outcome, if I participate, will something ever happen? Is this just a gimmick, a marketing trick, or are they actually asking me something which will matter? And if that is the case, then what's in it for me? How does it affect me? What do I get out of this process? Does it matter into my life? And if either of these is zero, then it doesn't matter how big the D is, because the problem with us working in the public sector or close to it is that we completely overemphasize the sense of duty people have. Most people have absolutely no sense of duty about participating in government renewal or smart city development or any such things. They couldn't care less. It's not the reason you can participate in smart car development. That's not the reason for anyone except maybe us, but not for regular people. They want to see something on this side, something which is actually asked, and city is going to do something, and yes, it will somehow benefit them, comes close to the daily life, actually changes something. And then of course, even though all these would be low, we can also make it easy to participate so that the cost drops. If it's easy and fast, then why not? We can as well invest a bit in that. And I don't think that has been solved very well in most participation systems in the digital domain, which creates big digital divide between those who are there, who want to lobby, who want to do politics, etc., and the rest, the big majority who are out of the system. And that's sort of there's a word called super democracy which has been used in that context, which means it doesn't mean a very good democracy, but it means a democracy in which some stakeholders use all the possible means to get their message through and the others are left out. It's like they are super democratic and the rest are not democratic at all. So with that, I need to stop because I went over time. Sorry. I had prepared an hour. That's my explanation.
A few questions, sorry for that.
And well, there were some questions. It was fine. Did I answer your question ever?
No.
What was that?
I never asked it.
Yeah, you didn't, but I saw you raise your hand.
Yes. Yes. I was just wondering that in Estonia we have a pretty developed network of governmental identification systems.
Yes, very good.
Extensive use. How do you foresee any usage of this infrastructure in this twin city project?
Well, I think it's to some extent has been, there's a project going on in which we try to bring over the big parts of the solutions from Estonia to Finland. Yeah. And of course, what we could do in the context of finest twins is to, for example, if some of those parts need development or prototyping or labbing, we could do it in the finest twins context instead of trying things out in the scale of the whole of Finland. So there should be more room to regional and time-limited pilots and tests to take things further and redesign. I think we could act as a lab for that work quite easily between Helsinki and Estonia. Thanks. Any other questions?
Yeah. We said that the cities are quite hungry, which is true, to embrace the smart solutions and technology. But what do you think about security readiness? Because I remember reading an article that said that most of the cities, municipalities, they embraced the solutions to make it more efficient, more connected, but they never walked through the possible scenarios like in Die Hard 4, which was, crackers taking over power systems and communication systems. So what do you think? Is the technology, the security lagging behind?
Easy answer is yes. If something is programmable, it is hackable. And of course, everything digital is programmable. So there should be very conscious process to acid test everything. But also that can be done in lab kinds of scenarios. What I don't like are security projects run by lawyers. It's a lawyer's job is to find generic reasons why something doesn't work. In practice, in digital security, what we should do is to actually work in practice with the systems and to approach them different. It's a constant, ongoing process. So I think that should be the way to do it. Think about Google AdWords. Google AdWords, Google advertising system is in a constant, ongoing war situation with all the cheaters of the world. There have been umpteen different models to trick the system, like when they launched the first click-based advertising that you bought, for example, 5,000 clicks. What you could immediately buy from India was 5,000 clicks for your competitors' ads. There's a business model which came out immediately that, all right, they sell ads by clicks, so I can buy a service which basically some anonymous people in India click the competitors' ad 5,000 times and it's all expired and no real customers ever saw it to start with. And it's an ongoing battle between sort of cheaters and service providers. Of course, when think about that, we also probably should think about in which areas is it most probable that such things happen. We have managed to build secure system to transfer money. So I don't think it's more probable that somebody is very, very interested in my urine samples than my money. So why should we make, for example, well-being systems more secure than banking systems? What's the point of that? I mean, isn't it enough that is as secure? But the area of Internet of Things, that area is critical because there you can do real damage, and we do have threats in there.
Just want to talk on your security argument. I mean, when we talk about money, I mean, money can be transferred back, right?
Yeah.
So you can rectify in the end in case something goes wrong. With personal data, I'm not sure that we actually have that opportunity, right? I mean, once it's public and you don't want to have it public, I mean, there is no way back.
Yeah, that is true.
So, I mean, we do have a different attack paradigm there.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, yes, I agree. But with a good My Data dashboard,
okay,
I could manage that a bit better. Any other points? All right.
Jarmo,
thank you.
Thank you.